Manipur today has the largest number of unlicensed arms. Well, it's always the executive that is responsible. It can never be the judiciary. We've been flooded with cases under UAPA. Cookie MLAs seem to have lost faith in the present dispensation. Their entire lives, as they were before the 3rd of May, have been turned upside down.
Hello and welcome to The Hindu. Manipur has been affected by ethnic violence among the Meitei and the Kuki-Zo people for the past 18 months. Around 60,000 people have been displaced from their homes and more than 250 people have been killed so far. An important aspect in this ongoing turmoil is the role of the judiciary. The wheels of justice, have they moved in Manipur? To talk more on this, I and my colleague Abhinay Lakshman are joined by Mr. Siddharth Mridul, former Chief Justice of the Manipur High Court. I would like to begin by asking you about the state of affairs in the northeastern state right now. Has it worsened or improved since you joined office in October 2023?
Well, the divide seems to be deeper because it's principally an ethnic conflict. And for a while, when I assumed office in Manipur, I was hopeful that there was going to be an end to the sporadic violence that had plagued Manipur before I arrived. And for a while, there was calm. There were periods of calm. There were periods of absence of violence. But honestly, I believe that violence has increased over the past year rather than decreased, except for those few periods of calm. But at no stage would I go so far as to say that peace has returned to Manipur.
Talking about peace, internet bans are once again becoming the norm in Manipur. Internet is still banned as of today in the state in 9 districts. And you have held the state government accountable on mechanical extensions of internet bans earlier. So, how did you walk the line between restricting internet to stop rumors and retaliatory violence and freeing the internet to provide citizens better access to information?
Right. So, when the violence broke out in Manipur on the 3rd of May 2023, internet was shut down completely. So, when I got to Manipur in late October, there was a complete internet ban, except for what they referred to as a whitelist, which was mainly for essential services. In terms of the decisions of the Supreme Court on freedom of expression, I think Anuradha Bhasin, we immediately asked the government to let us know how they could indefinitely impose a complete ban on internet. And within a short period of, I believe, a fortnight, we were able to limit internet shutdown to the areas where there was persistent violence. And that was permitted only from the standpoint that the social media was being used to incite people and to mislead them. And that had the possibility of leading to carnages. So, except for those few pockets, which were very limited, we were able to restore internet connectivity to everybody all over the state. And that continued till the last incident in Jiribam with the abduction of the women and the children, and the arson and the violence that followed in Imphal. which resulted in the state government reimposing that ban, for which notice was given to them, and it is still pending. That was in the last week of my tenure as chief. We gave them notice asking them to show cause why the we ought not to issue a mandamus directing them to lift the ban. It's still pending.
So you mentioned social media, like limiting the internet restrictions to places where limited places where these social media was being used to incite incidents of violence. But as we have seen in the case of Manipur, social media and internet was not the only way that people were spreading false information or
Agreed.
trying to incite violence. So how was that part of your consideration when you were deciding the
Absolutely.
place? And
See, we wanted to make sure that whatever factors would contribute to inciting people, provoking people to take the law into their own hands, we were able to plug all those areas. We do not have absolute control over either the tools of technology, but wherever we thought that for a limited period of time, internet was having a detrimental effect on the lives of the people, on the security of the state, we permitted it to an extent. That was always subject to review, and there came a time when there was no need for any kind of shutdown in any area.
right.
But unfortunately, it didn't last long, because the violence in Manipur, as you know, has been sporadic.
So when you did go into the state, you took charge of the High Court. I'm sure you took stock of how the district judiciaries are functioning, or rather not, so
Right.
to speak. What did you see as far as the district judiciary are concerned? Regular matters like test identification parades, se leke bail hearings, remand hearings, custody hearings. What was it that you saw when you first took charge of administering the judiciary in the state?
Right. First of all, free movement was severely restricted. Judicial officers were under permanent threat, continuous threat. So, the first step that was taken by me was to ask the state government to provide adequate security to all the judicial officers. The second thing that had to be done, and this is the responsibility of the state, to produce their witnesses.
Right.
If the prosecution witness doesn't turn up, you cannot progress a case. Till the time that the evidence is recorded, it's impossible to take it to its logical conclusion. So, the judicial officers were instructed to be firm with the prosecution and to make sure that prosecution witnesses were produced so that no case came to a standstill. And it did speed up matters, because if you observe over the past 13 odd months, the number of cases that have been determined finally has jumped from the period immediately preceding that time. It has. And we've continued to press upon the executive to make sure that court proceedings are not stalled for want of faith in the system, for want of fear, right? And judicial officers, of course, initially there were a lot of complaints by judicial officers of there being pressures on them, for want of a better word. But over a period of time, that pressure eased. Once they felt more secure, they were able to discharge their functions. And that is evident from what has happened in the last 6 months. The number of matters that have been concluded has gone up.
So, the discharge of functions, it happened despite the ethnicity of the judicial officer concerned. Were people in the hill deciding cases for people in the valley, or vice versa? Did you
That
see?
couldn't happen.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. The reason is simple. After the incidents immediately after the 3rd of May, all the cookies left the valley. The areas which are where the majority community is Meiteis, there are no Kuki inhabitants anymore. That happened in as far back as in May of 2023. And similarly, in the hills, there are no Meiteis. So the difficulty was that we had to reorganize the judiciary to post officers who could preside over courts in areas, in the hill areas dominated by the Kukis and other tribes, right? And similarly in the valley, right? Unfortunately, the only way forward was that Meitei officers, judicial officers, were posted in the valley, and uh, tribal officers and other officers, Pangals, were posted in the hills. The other thing about Manipur is that although it has 16 districts, there are only 8 judicial districts. And most of the courts were functioning from government buildings, uh, which gave them some sense of security, but it is not the ideal situation for a court to be located uh, within the same building as the executive.
Are they still functioning from government buildings?
Not all of them. The one area of collaboration which paid off is that we were able to inaugurate 4 court complexes in the past year. We were able to inaugurate court complexes in Thobal, in Tamenglong, in the hills, and in another one at Bishnupur, and the last one at Mao in Senapati district. So now we have our own court complexes, which has been done in the past year or so.
Looking at the ongoing conflict, who do you think is responsible for this? Was it the High Court judgment or the tension had been simmering? What is your take on this?
My take is simply this. I do not believe that you can hold the judgment of the High Court as being the one responsible for everything that has happened in Manipur.
Maybe which triggered the violence.
Manipur, from what I have observed, has been sitting on a powder keg with simmering discontent for a long time. Right? They have felt isolated. Right? They believe that they've been excluded from the rest of the country. So there has been simmering discontent for a long time, historically. If at all, and I say this very advisedly, what that direction issued by the High Court did was the spark that lit the fire. That was the spark. And I believe that it did so unwittingly and inadvertently. And I'll tell you why. The simple issue that was pending before the High Court then, and that judgment has now been reviewed by the Manipur High Court after I took charge as chief, was asking the state government to respond to the central government in relation to the Meiteis' demand for scheduled tribe status. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. It did not direct anybody to give a scheduled tribe status to Meiteis. But it was blown out of proportion locally. It was made to seem as if they were directed to be included as a scheduled tribe. And there was a reaction which was unprecedented and which was violent, to say the least. But to hold the High Court responsible for everything that has happened in Manipur is far from the truth and is most unfair.
But I would like to ask, sir, given that you described Manipur as a state that has been sitting on a powder keg for a while, do you believe that the High Court could have looked at the matter before it at that time more carefully, given gone into the history of what has happened with that issue so far, and whether maybe we should wait for states and executives to respond and then issue directions? Do you believe that they could have done anything differently given the situation in the state that it was in?
See, let me tell you, with the benefit of hindsight, we can always say that things could have been done differently. But to find fault with what was done at that time is going to the extreme. Nobody could have anticipated. The purpose of the judiciary is expeditial disposal of all issues. And the more vexed an issue is, right, the approach is that the earlier the resolution ought to be. Some issues should not be kept pending, right, because they're crying out for immediate attention. And it was otherwise, in my view, an innocuous order. Of course, if you say that uh, were both sides given an opportunity of being heard, I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but I believe they were. I won't be able to comment on that because it was not listed before me at that time. This happened prior to my arrival in Manipur, long before my arrival in Manipur. But as soon as it could be clarified, because that's what the review was for and the appeal was for, it was clarified that it had a very limited scope. Eventually, the whether a community can be categorized as a scheduled tribe or not is not within the domain of the judiciary at all. The constitution has an exhaustive procedure for that. The only purpose that I saw for that direction was to ask the state government to respond to the center on that issue. That's all.
So, what do you think about the role of the state government as well as the central government? Why have they not been able to tackle this issue for the past 18 months? Where are they lacking?
See, it's a complex issue, and I speak from my personal experience. Manipur today, uh, the problem is not straightforward, right? The problem is infiltration from across the border. There is infiltration from across the border, which is the reason why I believe that the government has considered revoking the FMR. Although that is being opposed by all the communities, by the Maitis, the Nagas are opposing the reconsideration of the FMR in their area, as are the Kukis in their area. And I'm told the state of Mizoram is observing it only in its breach, right? So for all practical purposes, there is still an FMR. Now the government has taken steps to prevent infiltration, and there is large-scale infiltration from the material that we see, from the demographics that has changed. We see that there is infiltration. There is infiltration. The question is that because of this free movement regime, are these people who were moving freely between the two countries, right? And they were originally Indian citizens or not, is not something for me to comment on because I do not have the wherewithal. But there is a lot of trans-border movement. There are a lot of refugees coming in from Myanmar. Myanmar is in a troubled state.
That is because of the coup there.
Yeah. Myanmar, the junta, and everything that is happening in Myanmar has resulted in a mass exodus into India. Now we don't know whether they are Indian nationals or not. Although I am told that the army is being tasked to keep track of all those who are claiming refugee status. But there is a problem. That is part of the problem. That is part of the problem. The other problem is that the influx into Manipur and that entire area of illegal arms and drugs. Right? That's a lethal combination. The golden triangle which existed in Southeast Asia seems to have moved almost to the borders, right, with Myanmar. And from the official record, I've been told that seizures in the past 6 years of drugs, right, has been to the extent of 60,000 crores. You'll have to verify that. Uh, but that has created an environment where you have people with ideas who have both the resources, right, and the opportunity. Manipur today has the largest number of unlicensed arms,
Snatched weapons also.
snatched or not snatched, smuggled. Right, there are snatched weapons. Weapons were snatched from the Manipur police. Right, that is also a matter of record. But besides that, that number pales into insignificance in comparison with the number of arms that have been smuggled into the country. And these are sophisticated weapons.
And this has been happening since when, according to you?
Well, I can only tell you about the last 13 months because I remember an incident where at More, a police officer got shot by a sniper from a distance of a couple of kilometers. From a distance of a couple of kilometers, right? Which shows that the arms that are being smuggled in, these are not indigenous arms. These are not arms snatched from the Indian army. So these arms are coming across the border. They are coming across the border. And in that sense, I have no doubt in my mind that till the time there is some sort of deterrent to the smuggling in of arms and drugs, it will only fuel this already volatile situation.
But isn't the center responsible for this?
Well, it's always the executive that is responsible. It can never be the judiciary. The judiciary, we've been flooded with cases under UAPA, under the NDPS, right? And the number of seizures of arms and weapons and drugs has been increasing, and it continues to rise. But eventually, how this menace is going to be plugged is entirely within the domain of the executive.
Right. There are thousands of cases that were filed in the initial days of the ethnic violence, and they continue to be filed. Are they being heard properly in the courts? Are trials being held? Because that is a black hole. We never get to know about.
I mean, in your time, how many of those cases would you say have started trial? Or
Has any case ended in conviction? Or
Cases
acquittal?
have ended in conviction. Not cases that may have been initiated while I was there, but cases have ended in conviction.
Of the violence
and appeals
period.
are pending.
Okay.
And the appeals are pending. But this does not relate to cases related to the violence that took place, because those cases, there was an SIT. SITs were appointed by the Honorable Supreme Court. That is prior to my arrival in Manipur. And the SIT investigation, I believe, is still underway. They are not being monitored by the Manipur High Court. They are being monitored directly by the Honorable Supreme Court.
You mentioned about influx of people from Myanmar, but is it fair to equate refugees with infiltrators? Because as army also,
It is not. It is not. But the point is that it is difficult for us to determine who is a refugee and who is an infiltrator.
us, you mean judiciary?
For us, yes. For us, I mean the judiciary. Even as a layperson, it is impossible for me to determine, to be able to distinguish between a refugee and a.
Ideally, what would you say the role of an executive in such a place should be when it is difficult for a lay person to identify an infiltrator from a refugee?
The role of the executive, as always, is to maintain law and order and to make sure that people are able to move about without fear of being either abducted or worse, killed. Always.
I wanted to ask you, since you have been in the state, just a blanket question I want to ask you. To what extent do you think the state government has been cooperative with the judiciary's efforts to start getting the ball rolling on having the judicial work going on again, and the relief work? You have been visiting the relief camps as well in Manipur. So, I mean, I just wanted to know, to what extent do you think the state government was?
Honestly, we've just about begun because we've just set up the court complexes. Judicial officers are provided with PSOs, right? But that is only for the duration of court working hours. They are left to their own devices, right? Thereafter, there is a palpable threat to them as individuals owing to the office they occupy, right? Progressing cases becomes impossible without the prosecution, right? It is also hindered by uh, interested persons barging into court complexes to prevent the judge from discharging his functions independently. As far as that is concerned, we have not been able to address that problem satisfactorily at all.
Who are these interested persons? The vigilante groups, you mean?
Interested persons are those who come to court on behalf of people who've been detained for alleged offences.
You mean armed groups which have
They
propped
are
up in the state?
they are not always armed groups, and I would not go so far as to say that they come to the court complexes armed, right? But they are there in large numbers.
So they try to influence a case.
Influence, yes, for euphemistically influence.
So then you said that these have not been able to be addressed at all. To what extent, I mean, have attempts to get them addressed like resulted in? What were these attempts like? Communications to state government, like?
No, we've been sending missives. We sent the state government a wish list. We have interacted with them on a regular basis, and we've asked them to make sure that judicial officers are safe, that court proceedings are not interrupted in any manner, right? Uh, but we haven't made much headway yet.
Why do you think that is the case?
The case, as I have said earlier, is that the refrain is the prevailing situation. That law and order is a priority. Securing the lives of the citizenry has to take precedence over the discharge of judicial functions. And they did not have adequate manpower.
And this is a case across the state or in particular pockets?
It's across the state. I'm talking about judicial districts. Not every district is a judicial district, right? I'm talking about the judicial districts. This is a problem. See, this is compounded by the fact that lawyers find it very difficult. Why lawyers? Nobody in Manipur can traverse the state even on the national highways, right? You can't commute from, say, Imphal to Dimapur, right? Without being hindered, without being harassed, without being extorted on occasion. We've already issued notice to them to keep the highways safe for travel by all citizens. This so is the case with the highway which goes towards Jiribam and Assam, right? That is now that's now the hotspot. That area, it's impossible to drive from Imphal to Jiribam and onwards to Assam. Impossible. Impossible. In fact, if I remember correctly, the advance party of the chief minister was attacked on the highway. There was an ambush. So, and you must realize, Imphal, there is a railway line under construction. There are highways under construction. But at this point of time, they are not serviceable. They are not usable at all. They are not. The only way in and out of Imphal is by air.
I want to talk to you about your experiences in visiting the relief camps. You spoke to people across communities, across professions, government, non-government, everybody. The lot of people are in relief camps. What did you see there when you spoke to people? What did you understand of the situation?
See, displaced persons in unison want to go home, regardless of whether they are cookies, they are maitis. Their lives have been disrupted. They've been uprooted from their homes, places where they may have stayed for generations. Their houses, according to them, have been burned down. Their lands have been taken over. Right. And this is not limited to any one community. This is both communities. They want to go home. They are being provided with basic amenities, right? Free food grains, right? Uh, per individual. But man doesn't live by food alone. They belong to different sections of society. They are from all walks of life. Some of them were professionals. Some of them were in the army. A large number of them were sports persons. Their entire lives, as they were before the 3rd of May, have been turned upside down. All of them, regardless of the threat perception, they want to go home. That was the repeated refrain. Whenever I spoke to them, and I visited a large number of camps, both in the valley as well as in Churachandpur, Kangpokpi, uh, all of them said the same thing. We'd like to go home. We'd like to go home. Everybody wants normalcy or the way things were prior to the 3rd of May. They want to go back to that.
Let's talk about solutions. What can be some of the possible solutions to this ongoing conflict? The Home Minister has said that we are getting the two communities to talk and resolve the issues. But we saw there was a meeting which was held, I think, in September in Delhi, where the Kuki-Zo and the Methi MLAs did not even sit in the same room.
From what I understand, and these efforts are laudable, because the only way you're going to be able to resolve this conflict is by getting the leaders of the communities to sit across the table, right? And I would have thought, as a layperson again, that the first thing is disarmament, the second thing is peace talks, right? Now, insofar as the meeting is concerned, and it has generated a lot of heat, even in Manipur, and there have been heated discussions over that meeting. I think the problem stems from the fact that I think the cookie MLAs seem to have lost faith in the present dispensation. Seem to have. That is what they've been articulating locally. That is what they've been articulating.
But most of them are still with the same Bharatiya Janata Party. So is it the state leadership?
The point is, increasingly, as I've observed, the clamor for president's rule seems to be gaining momentum.
Across the state or only in particular areas?
Well, I can only speak to you from my own experience, which is in and around Imphal, and all the protests that have been taking place in Imphal, and my interaction. It's not very extensive, but my limited interaction. That till the time they are able to restore normalcy, semblance of peace, right? Uh, there is going to be turmoil in Manipur, not just in Imphal, in Manipur, and the abduction of women, children, and their subsequent massacre, and people going missing from various communities has not helped matters. So, of course, this is again not something within the. This was not within my jurisdiction at all.
But as far as the solution is concerned, how do you think the judiciary can possibly aid for a, I mean, or even help towards
Maybe
getting
punishing
a
the
solution?
culprits.
See, all that we can do and we have done is that in a PIL, notice was issued to the government to inform the court on affidavit of the steps being taken by them actively to maintain law and order, to maintain public order. The court can only judicially review the statutory performance of statutory duties by state authorities. Beyond that, it is for the elected representatives and the executive to take necessary steps. We can only require of them to discharge their functions in accordance with law.
Now that you speak of it, in your tenure, how many times have you seen the state discharge their functions according to law?
Well, it would be extreme for me to say that they haven't discharged their functions at all. My personal view, and this is my personal view, I clarify, is that I get the feeling that they could be somewhat overwhelmed by the enormity of the problem. And occasionally, I have also felt that the executive may be working at cross purposes. They are not all on the same page.
Could you elaborate on why you think that that seems to be the case?
The frequent calls for the resignation of certain individuals from different quarters and the uh, constant bickering over how the government, elected government, is feeling handicapped in discharging their functions leads me to believe that there is a rift in the lute.
Did at any point of time you also had to change, say, because we hear stories that when you move from valley to the hills, you have to change your personal security
All the time.
and the cars also.
Not the cars. I traveled by the same vehicle, but my personnel, the chauffeur, the escort, would change at the border of the district. So that would happen. Yes,
It's still happening.
all the
Even
time.
18 months later.
All the time.
So people from the valley obviously cannot move
No,
to the hills and vice versa.
no. So the staff that usually accompanies me belong to other tribes, principally the Nagas, right, or the Pangals, right, because they have free movement, as did I. I must emphasize that I had free movement all over the state, by road to some degree, uh, otherwise by chopper. Because some roads after the monsoon, which is fierce, there were a lot of landslides, and the roads that were under construction are not fit for travel. At least not at the moment.
Your judgment in that UIPA bail case is extremely, just for the record, I know it's not necessarily like prudent, but I just wanted to ask you, just to establish that that was a historic order, that bail order that you had delivered. and the subsequent order that stayed, that order was also unique in its way. So in that moment, what were you thinking when that bail order was stayed in that particular manner?
Order are you talking
I am
about? For the
talking.
readers,
I
for
am.
the viewers,
I
sorry.
am just specifically talking about the bail order, the order by which you granted bail to Devangana Kalita, Natasha Narwal
In the Delhi.
in the Delhi riots cases where they were accused and in prison for about a year by when you gave the bail.
Well, I think Alfred Lord Tennyson put it best. Ours is not to question why, ours is but to do or die. Right? We are bound even by the obiter dicta of the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court said that the judgment in Devangana Kalita, Natasha Narwal, and Asif Iqbal Tanha was not to operate as a precedent. It was neither cited before us in the other appeals, nor did we rely on it. We had to independently determine all the other matters that were listed before us.
Do you think the collegium system needs a relook?
Definitely.
In what sense?
Well, that's a very uh, serious question, and I will have to give you the background. Right up to the time of the second judge's case, the executive, the president appointed judges in consultation with the chief justices. Right. In the second judge's transfer case, that position changed. The majority in the constitution bench expressed the view that consultation meant concurrence and that no appointment could be made without the concurrence of the chief justice. That was further developed in the third judge's transfer case, where an elaborate mechanism, as there is today, was brought into operation, where they said exactly how the collegium would function both at the high courts and the Supreme Court. Prior to that, judges were by and large appointed by the executive in consultation with the Chief Justice. And there is no gainsaying the fact that some of the best judges that the country has had, both at the Supreme Court and at the High Courts, were elevated during that period. Right? That is not to say that the best judges are not in harness today. No, they are. But the collegium system has invited criticism from various quarters on the assertion that there is a lot of favoritism, nepotism, right? What is in lay parlance referred to as bhai bhatijavad. Now, it is unfortunate for the judiciary, which is a beacon of hope for the people of this country today, right? To be referred to in terms which brings their independence and impartiality into question. Therefore, when you ask me whether we need to take a fresh look at it, my personal opinion is that we do.
You mentioned that a lot of the criticism is about this perception, that assertion that nepotism, so on and so forth. But don't you think the real concerns about the system are of the lack of transparency and diversity, so to speak?
I don't believe that you can get better people than judges of a court to determine the fitness of a candidate for elevation to that high court. You cannot. Right? It cannot be done entirely in the public view for the reason that it might compromise a candidate who is being considered for elevation. Right? It is therefore considered prudent to look at the suitability of a candidate without expressing it in too many words. And on the other hand, when a candidate is, for whatever reason, found less suitable, it would blight his career if you were to express your opinion about his fitness in too many words. Because it's never a case of somebody not being found unfit. It is always a case of somebody being found more suitable. Don't mistake this. I'm not saying that the best and the brightest always get elevated. I've never believed that. I've always believed that there were people who were brighter and better than me, more suitable than me, who did not get an opportunity or who were overlooked. But we've still had, uh, by and large, exceptionally gifted, hardworking judges on the bench. The question is not whether the judges who are elevated are discharging their functions diligently or whether they are capable or fit and suitable or not. The question is, as you said, transparency. If somebody questions an appointment, any elevation or a recommendation on the ground that it could have been motivated by extraneous reasons apart from just suitability, then the judiciary would do well to steer clear of any controversy. We do not wish to be treated in the same, painted by the same brush as the political executive. Right? These are not spoils of war. Judges should be appointed on the basis of suitability, which they are by and large, for the most part. But we must also insulate the system, the judiciary, from unwarranted attacks. Having said this, having said this, the collegium system in operation has raised eyebrows on occasion, and therefore I see no harm if the people who have the requisite experience, right, revisit it, refine it, and if it requires any maintenance or any fine tuning, why not? It should be done. It should be done. I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you have to constantly make sure that the bathtub is clean.
I think that will be all, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
It's been a pleasure.
Same
Yeah. And a learning experience. Yeah.
for us too.